Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to show you guys the six books that I actually liked in college and 3 short stories that I liked too. I got my BA in English, so I knew it was going to be a bunch of reading, which I actually enjoyed. I did like it, but I knew there was going to be a lot of reading that I didn't want to read, and for the most part I was okay with most of it. I didn't enjoy all of it, but there were some books that I loved. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I was introduced to these books. Though I think one book I read before I went to college, but whatever. I still wanted to add it because I did read it for a class in college. Okay, so there are 6 books, 3 short stories that I loved, and I wanted to share with you guys. I did write this in a blog post, so I will link that down below if you want to read it instead of watching it. But let's get right into that list. So the first book, it was The Strangeness of Beauty by Lydia Minatoya. And actually this book it's autographed. So that's really cool. I'm like, oh, I never had a book that was autographed by the author. So really cool. And it was such a good book. Like, I remember I had to read like 20 books for this class and I had to write like a little paper for each, a short essay for each one. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna have to read like parts of this book and then just write as best as I can. But when I started reading it, I fell in love and I just had to keep going. I could not stop. I could not put this book down. It was so good. It's about 3 women, like 3 generations of women. There is, I'm not gonna remember their names at the moment because I read it like a few months ago, but these 3 women, they're all Japanese or Japanese American, and the main character, she moves to Japan with her sister, and her sister gets married and gets pregnant. But while she's giving birth, the mother dies. She dies, her sister dies, so she's pretty much left to be the surrogate mother for this little girl. And the father of the little girl, decides that she wants her to go back to Japan to learn about her heritage and pretty much everything, their culture and everything from Japan. Like, forget America, go to Japan. So obviously the main character goes with the daughter. She's like, I'm not staying here, I'm going with her. I can't leave her alone. So she goes with her. And the fascinating thing is they go with the grandmother. And the grandmother actually obviously it's 3 generations: grandmother, stepmom, and daughter. The grandmother actually abandoned this daughter. She loved the last one, the actual daughter's mom, but she did not love her and she kind of abandoned her. So it was such a weird dynamic between these 3 characters trying to live together and trying to teach this little girl in the ways in the Japanese culture and the Japanese heritage, and just trying to help her, but also dealing with these deep issues between each other. It is such a good book. I highly recommend this one. I'm like, I really wish I remember the character names. They're probably super simple too and I just can't remember. I should have read them, but oh, it's okay. I definitely recommend this one. I loved it and I couldn't put it down. Yeah, even when I had a ton of homework to do. The next books. I remember I had to choose a series, a young adult series, and I had to write a massive paper on them. So I wanted to choose one that I hadn't read before because I read a lot of young adults. So I chose the Darkest Mind series, and I got like the whole set. It was good. I'm not gonna lie. It was good. Now that I really think about it, I read it like 3 years ago. I believe it was like 3 years ago. It was a good series. Not as great as The Hunger Games, not as great as Harry Potter, not as great as a bunch of other ones, but it was good and good enough to write a paper. But I was happy that I got to choose this series, and it was definitely had those weird elements of fantasy and YA where it's a bunch of teenagers that have to pretty much save the world. That's pretty much what it is. But these teenagers have powers and they're able, especially one who has a very specific power. I believe her name is, oh, I just had it. Crap, I forgot it. But she has the power to control minds. It's pretty much what it is, and it's very, very interesting. And she falls in love, obviously, and, you know, saves the planet in 4 lovely books. I did enjoy this series. I'm not gonna lie, I did enjoy it, but compared to all the other series, not that amazing, but it is a good series to read. I think it's still worth the read. Does that make sense? I didn't completely love it, but I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it. I hope that makes sense. Do you guys have that weird feeling in the middle where you're like, not sure, but yes, it was pretty good. Okay, the next one is Ethan Frome, and this one's written by Edith Wharton. This was a pretty good book. It's super short. I read it in like a few hours. It was pretty good. I bought it like secondhand, so it has a bunch of marks in it, and even says, I'm guessing, someone's name on it. But anyway, I had to read this book for school, and I had to write the little mini paper. I was like, fine, I could read the whole thing. And it was interesting, I gotta admit. It's like this dude who lives in rural America, like a long time ago, and he's married to this not so amazing lady. She's kind of rude, kind of awful human being, but I actually feel like she's probably the character I'm like, I understand. Like, I understand what you did. Like, why you did what you did. But anyway, there's that lady he's married to. And then the lady's younger, I believe it's cousin, comes into the picture and lives with them because the lady is sick and she needs help, so they bring her in. They take her in. So Ethan ends up falling in love with that girl and is eventually being kind of cruel with his wife. And the whole point of the story is that eventually one day the lady has to leave for go visit a doctor in another little town, so she's pretty much gone for a night. And the funny thing is, I honestly thought they were gonna sleep together. Yeah, but they don't. They kind of have like a date, and that's about it. I think they kiss. I believe they kiss. Wow, I can't remember that. But the ending is what's like the clincher. You're like, he's so in love with her that he just wants to drop the woman. He wants to drop everything, and the woman figures that out kind of, and she's like, instead of taking it out on him, she takes it out on the girl, and she kicks the girl out. The girl has nowhere to go, so Ethan promises to go with her. And the curious thing is, at the beginning of the book it gives it away, but the curious thing is they eventually end up doing something that was so stupid. You might thought it was very stupid, and they all end up at the end together, all 3 of them still living in the same place together. The saddest thing in the world, and it was just such a twisted, crazy story, and I was like, wow, this was totally different from anything I have read. Like, usually there's such happy endings. This one was not, so that's why I thought it was a really good book. Totally took me by surprise. Totally took me by surprise. Okay, so I took a lovely Jane Austen class. I'm like, oh, I needed to take this class. I knew I just wanted to. I loved Emma. I'm like, I wanted to read it. Like, I had this desire to read Emma, but it was never that big. So when I had to read it for school, I was like, okay, let's do this. And I read it, and I loved it. I loved Emma, though she's like the character you're supposed to hate, but you kind of love her as well. And then one of my friends' favorite guy, like favorite male character, is Mr. Knightley, and he's obviously in this book, and he is like the dashing, amazing character who has well, she says he has no faults. I think he does. And she falls in love with him. But I find it such an interesting dynamic. He's like way older than her, so at first he was like a father figure, and then as she got older, he was more a love interest. So it was very good. There's this whole dynamic where she tries to set up her friend, trying to make her, well, not make her, but have her fall in love and rise in society, and that doesn't work out for her. Pretty much this woman is like humbled every single time. She has this pride in her, and she's humbled every single time until finally she finds love. She never wants to get married in the beginning. I find that really cool. But then she actually does find love and marries Mr. Knightley, which is obvious like from the beginning to me. So Emma is such a great book. If you love those old English tales, I love them. Like Pride and Prejudice is obviously my favorite, but Emma was a great addition. Okay, okay, number 6, I don't know which one this is a very classic, an American classic that everyone probably has read, but I never read it. I read Tom Sawyer. I did not read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And I got to admit, I enjoyed this one so much more than Tom Sawyer. The reason I didn't read this one because I didn't like Tom Sawyer. He drops out. Anyway, the reason I didn't read this one was because I didn't like Tom Sawyer. But Huckleberry Finn is such a cute character. Like he is, like you have hope for him. They have this desire for him to like actually grow and be better than what he is. And that's what annoys me about the ending, because I was like, oh, I can't believe he doesn't like change at all. I was just like, what, how can he not change? But that was the ending. I feel like everyone's read it, so I'm sorry if I ruined Huckleberry Finn for you, but through the whole thing you think that he's growing and he's changing the way he thinks about African Americans, the way he thinks about education, about having parents and all that. Because I mean, the kid had a horrible start, obviously. I cried in the beginning, but point is, you feel like he's changing, and then he just doesn't change, and that kind of pisses me off. But besides that, it is very well written, and it's a very good book that I recommend everyone should read. And it's very easy. Like Huck is such a relatable character because he's kind of like the young, not so smart kid, but he's actually he's an ingenious little boy too, but he's just not, the education's not there, so he can't advance more. So that's why you have so much hope for him. So sad. Such a good book though. Okay, so I mentioned the Jane Austen books, but now obviously I got to reread Pride and Prejudice again. I love Pride and Prejudice. Mr. Darcy is like the man I want to marry. He's just so awesome. So I got to reread this book again, and I got to write a paper about it. You got Elizabeth, who is just the most, well, she can be relatable to some people, probably not to a lot, but she's just so proud. She has this prejudice against certain people, and she right away believes the lies against Mr. Darcy. I hope you don't hear that. It's a vacuum. My father is vacuuming, but we're gonna keep going. Anywho, you just love their relationship, the whole story, and just how the lives used to be like. They're like balls. The balls are so sweet. They just so pretty. I'm pretty sure they still have balls here. Well, not here in the US, but like in Europe and all that. But it's just so cool to do that, you know? I don't know. I just love these books. I have to read the rest of her books. I have not, and they're just amazing. I just love Pride and Prejudice so much. Okay, the 3 short stories. They're kind of in the creepier side. I have this weird side to me that's kind of dark. So there are some darker stories that I like, and I tend to write dark stories. I'm not sure why that is. Okay, so the first one I read like my first English class it was actually here in CNM, and I'm like, my teacher was awesome. He wore red tennis shoes, red Converse, and I thought that was the coolest thing. But the point is, he showed us 2 of my favorite of these short stories. He had us read short stories and write about them. And the first one, ooh, it's kind of loud. The first one was The Yellow Paper. Wow, that one was a creepy story. I mean, okay, they're in this book. Those two stories that I'm talking about, literature and the writing process. The only reason I keep this book is because of all the short stories. It's just so creepy because it's this woman who you're not sure what's exactly going on. She is the very unreliable narrator and protagonist of this short story, and she talks about her husband who takes care of her but pretty much lowers her. You have this sense that that's what he's doing, and he's like, you can't do anything, you suck, stay in bed, stay doing this. Pretty much she's also mentally ill. You don't know if the man is actually awful or not, so it's kind of weird. but then slowly she goes like insanely mentally ill. Like he stops letting her go outside, and she's only allowed to be in this one room that has yellow wallpaper that she really, really hates. And slowly she ends up making stories with the yellow wallpaper, and it kind of goes into this dark phase where she like starts dreaming of or imagining this person or this evil being in the yellow wallpaper, and it's so weird. It's so good, but it's so weird at the same time. Very fascinating. I'm not gonna lie, it's weird, but I like it. Okay, the second short story is my favorite one, and I think I just like pronouncing it because it sounds so cool. It's The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Another very dark. I mean, if you know anything about Edgar Allan Poe or you've heard of him, he's obviously a very dark person, and he wrote very dark short stories and books and all that. I remember I had to write a paper about it, but it was another thing. So, in The Cask of Amontillado, this is not one of his most famous ones, like The Raven I think is, but in The Cask of Amontillado, it's this guy. His name is, I totally forgot his name, Fortunato and I don't know. It was this guy, this dude, right? And he had this friend who always belittled him, always lowered him, and he got fed up. So he decided that he was going to kill him. And what he does is that this friend is such a wine connoisseur. So he goes up to him and he says, hey, I have this amontillado, which is a type of drink. And he says like, I'm gonna go get this other guy to check it out and make sure it's the real deal, because who knows. And the guy's, I think his name was Monstresor, I can't pronounce it correctly. And he's like, absolutely not, I will go, because he is very prideful and obviously wants to prove that he is the one that can do it, right? So this guy takes his friend to his home, and under his home they have this, what are they called? Pretty much where they used to bury the dead, under the homes, and they had this huge rooms and halls just filled with where they bury their dead. He takes them slowly. It's all dark, it's gloomy, and every single time that he walks down there with a dude, he's like, hey, maybe I should go back, because he looks like the guy's getting sick, the friend. He's like, maybe we should go back. And the guy's like, no, I'm gonna go check this out. I'm gonna go check this out. He did that like 3 times. Anywho, he goes down there, and eventually, for like one sentence in the whole story, he's like, he ties him up. He chains him to the wall. And the friend, or he just starts building up a wall around him, and he leaves his friend there to die, pretty much, obviously. And it's just such a dark story, and in the end it seems like he might have some regrets, but like not really. So I highly recommend that one. I did not do it justice. Definitely recommend reading that one. Okay, the last short story, gosh, why are these all so dark, is Life in the Ironmails by Rebecca Harding Davis. This one is online, I believe. I think you just have to Google that title. It's such an interesting story. I believe this was American literature, this class, so that's why it's that. It's about the times where it was like the whole factoring times, where everything was factories, and they had these people working in horrible conditions, and they had them working for long hours. And it's one of those people. And we follow this lovely lady who is not the most pleasing looking, but she takes care of her, I think it's cousin, and she's actually in love with him. What it is that she's been working all day, but then she realizes her cousin isn't home and is still working, so she takes him food in the middle of the rain. She has to walk all the way to where he is and takes him food. And this cousin of hers is very nice, but he's kind of a jerk because he doesn't love her, he doesn't like her, and he just amuses her pretty much. But he is a very talented artist. He's a sculptor, and out of the stuff he's making, like the leftover crap that in the factories, he makes this sculpt the sculpture, and it's beautiful and fascinating, he makes and it's just there. And while he's working, these 4 men show up and they see it and they're like, oh my goodness, there's talent here. And they call over the guy. He's like, hey, what is this? Where does this come from? It's a sculpture of a lady. So what does this lady want? They ask her. They end up saying that the whole story is just very sad. But they end up stealing money from some of these guys. And it just shows the whole sadness and unfairness that the US was before. It was very sad. But it does end in a hopeful note, so it's not that bad. But it is a very good story to read. It's such a good short story, and I really enjoyed it. So I highly recommend that you read it as well. Okay, so that's the end of all the books. I feel like I explained the first one so much that it was just long. But if you're still here, thank you. But I do ask that you please subscribe and like this video down below, because that really does help my channel, as well as sign up to the email list, because that's where you'll get more bookish content. I put articles, I do short stories, and pretty much about last week, that's what it's called, where I tell you all about my week. So please subscribe down below, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys.